Krishna, everyone. I hope you're having a very happy weekend. My name is Gopigita Shomakar, and I am the Vice Principal of TKG Academy and privileged to serve as a regional representative of the ISKCON Ministry of Education in North America. So we are beginning a journey of Shravanam Week. We are going to be celebrating Books Are the Basis during September 22nd to September 28th, where all around the world, internationally, devotees are being encouraged to read Srila Prabhupada's books and share their appreciation for and their experiences reading Srila Prabhupada's books. So I'm really lucky that I have the association of quite a few talented youth in ISKCON here in America, and they're going to be joining us today for a panel discussion on their experiences of reading Srila Prabhupada's books. So here they are one by one. I'd like to introduce you to Keshev. And there we are. Hare Krishna, Keshev. If you could please introduce yourself to everybody and let us know a little bit about you.
Hi, Will. I'm Keshev. I'm 22 years old now, recently. I've kind of grown up in the movement. My dad's been involved with the movement for basically since he's 16. He just got recently initiated by Srila Prabhupada. And I am from Orlando, but I'm currently attending school in Dallas. So I help run a small preaching program called Mantra Lounge at the University of Texas at Dallas. And I'm finishing up my last year as a mechanical engineering student.
Thank you so much, Keshev. And now we will introduce all the way across the states, Mayuri from New Jersey. If you can tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hare Krishna, my name is Mayuri. I'm 14 years old and I'm from New Jersey. With Srila Prabhupada's mercy, I was born into a Krishna conscious family. And I'm currently a student, and I really enjoy singing kirtan and bhajan.
Okay, thank you. So glad that you're here with us. And third, we have another youth from Dallas, Nitai Pran.
Hare Krishna, my name is Nitai. I am 17 years old, and I'm a third generation Hare Krishna devotee. And at the moment, I try to involve myself as much as I can with the temple and the UCD program and trying to preach to the youth in our college.
Okay, thank you. And last, we have reversed alphabetical order. Abhay Charan, another esteemed youth here in our Dallas community.
Hare Krishna, my name is Abhay Charan. I'm 19 years old, and I'm currently a finance major at same University as Keshev and Nitai, University of Texas at Dallas. And my background in Krishna consciousness is that when I was about 4 years old, my parents joined in Denver, Colorado. And since then, we moved to Dallas in 2008, and since then we've been going every Sunday. And then in 2012 we moved next to the temple, so now even more. So.
Okay, thank you. So now we'll get all of our participants up on the screen. And I'm really excited about this conversation with you. Actually, in order to find youth who were interested in reading Srila Prabhupada's books and actively reading Srila Prabhupada's books, it wasn't the easiest of tasks. As you all know, doing kirtan, finding youth who are involved in kirtan is every single temple has at least a group of 10 to 15 of those. But reading Srila Prabhupada's books is something that's not so common. I first wanted to hear from you. Why do you think that it would be more difficult to find youth who are just not as interested in reading Srila Prabhupada's books?
I think it's a couple of things. One of them is the necessity, because it's not been made a priority for a lot of youth. They understand that kirtan is important. There's the Yugatama. They understand that chanting the japa is important because it's if they're interested in getting initiated, they have to chant 16 rounds. But it's not been made a tangible part of everybody's daily sadhana that you should read something daily. The amount of people that make that a genuine part of their focus. Like Vaisheshika Prabhu makes that a focus for him and his disciples in his area, but that, especially among youth, it's something that needs to be focused on a bit more. And I think one other thing is that it takes something more out of you, where there's a lot of different things in devotional service that you can do kind of half-heartedly. I have to admit that I've chanted a lot of rounds half-heartedly. The way that Srila Prabhupada's process, you can't do it half.
Anyone else have any thoughts on that?
That's a piggyback off what Keshev said. I think it's not a requirement in our movement. For example, for chanting, we all want to become initiated at one point. So there's a requirement for us to slowly or on your own pace build up to 16 rounds. But for reading, there's no such requirement. I think recently, in the past few years, they've added Bhakti-Shastrы as a requirement. And so I think eventually it'll take more effect as it gets more people get used to it.
It's not a requirement. That's a really important point that I'm glad that I think they have, you said. I don't know the information as to if reading Srila Prabhupada's books is part of a requirement. I remember about 15 years ago, my Guru Maharaj asked us to complete the Bhakti-Shastra in order to initiate us, but then he initiated us anyways. And I think, even though I hadn't completed it at that time, and I also think that for youth who are born and raised in Krishna consciousness, there's just like an acceptance that they know the philosophy. There's like almost like an underlying acceptance, and not necessarily a need for them to be trained in, say, a brahmacharya or brahmacharini ashram. Why else do you think that perhaps reading Srila Prabhupada's books is not so common among teenagers and young adults?
I think that especially for youth, as we're talking about right now, life in general can get really busy with like school, jobs, extracurriculars, temple in general, going every Sunday. And I think because of that, people can feel that it's almost a task to read Srila Prabhupada's books, because kind of what Keshev was that you really have to focus on what you're reading, because Srila Prabhupada made these books for us to study. And even though he wrote them in such a beautiful way that's easy for us to understand, you really have to absorb what he is saying so you can understand it fully.
Yeah, important point. Yeah. Anita, any thoughts?
To go off what Mayuri was saying, you really have to have the right mentality when reading Srila Prabhupada's books. Otherwise, you're not going to get the full effect of you're not going to enjoy it. So like actually understanding your mentality in reading is really important. And I feel like a lot of the youth like today are just reading it because either they have to, because their parents are telling them, or there's a lot of pressure, and they're not actually really enveloping themselves in it properly.
I think that's an important point you made, that perhaps they've had that association of reading with like a nagging request by mom and dad. And so that immediately takes out the like enjoyment of it. Perhaps mom and dad are like, have been forcing them since their childhood to read Srila Prabhupada's books and didn't make it necessarily enjoyable. Okay, now straight up talk. Let's just real talk here. How many of you find that there are some books that are really boring? Anyone? Not really? Yes? Okay, so what books? Clearly, you four are reading Srila Prabhupada's books. You have engaged yourself in reading Srila Prabhupada's books of your own choice. So which books did you at any point find were really boring? So for me, as a child in Krishna consciousness, I found, so I love the Bhagavad-Gita, I love the Chaitanya Charitamrita, I even love the Srimad-Bhagavatam because there are so many stories there. But I found the Ishopanishad to be just something that I just couldn't like really get my mind into. We would read it for Bhakti-Shastrы, but I wasn't really able to get my mind into that. The Ishopanishad, what else? I think that was probably the one that was the most tedious for me. And I think that's natural. What about the rest of you? Which books are a little bit harder for you to get into?
I think the Nectar Instruction and maybe the Bhagavad-Gita are a little bit more, I would say, tedious as I was growing up as well, because with the nectar of instruction, it's more about the rules. It's a lot of rules, as it's in the name, nectar of instructions. So it's a lot about, you should do this, you shouldn't do this, you should associate with this, and there's a lot of different kinds of rules like that. So it's not so much, and nobody likes being bound by anything, the rules of sort. So I definitely understand why it would be a lot more boring, especially for me. I thought it was a little too.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, but like, I never felt that with nectar of instruction. Like, one of my issues is that whenever I've been reading, I've always been kind of very sporadic about things. So there's certain sections I'd go into to search for something. But nectar of devotion, I had tried searching in one time, and that had a lot of rules that I found difficult to follow up with. Because nectar of instruction, I feel like they're practical applications where like I can find something I could apply to. But like nectar of devotion, I think I picked a wrong section of it to jump into. But like I got into some section, and it's an offense to wear red and blue in front of the deities, or like to do this or that. It seems very inaccessible compared to like, okay, control the tongue, control the belly. Like I can understand that those are necessary, but it's like it feels more far removed. Now later that I've gotten into some stuff, I'm still reading sporadically, but there's sections of nectar of devotion that I really like in terms of the aesthetic, like the rasa theory and stuff that Rupa Goswami goes into in relation to Krishna. But I feel like
I haven't reached nectar of devotion yet, so
I think that the difficulty for me, like in boringness, is kind of just sticking through with any one book, going through to the end. Because like I'll say, okay, yeah, Ishopanisha is interesting, but I stopped halfway through it. I haven't finished it yet.
Yeah, interesting, huh? I love that the nectar of devotion, you're right. It's interesting because the nectar of devotion has some of those really, 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 really long lists of what to do and what not to do, which is so interesting. I remember reading them when I was like 7 or 8, like, wow, there's a lot of specific things we're supposed to follow. How can we? Even the way you walk in the temple, the way you pay obeisances. But then the second half or third half of nectar devotion is just pure bliss. It's just so much rasa and so much a relationship with the Lord. Anyone else? Like, what about the rest of you?
I think I kind of have a relation to the Srimad-Bhagavatam. For me personally, I think that when I first picked up the first canto, I didn't want to miss any of the introduction because I thought it would make me like a super genius or something. But I couldn't get through it. Like every time I would try to think about what you're reading, I would just drift away and I would zone out. So I think maybe it was because I was into introduction parts, and I know a lot of the Srimad-Bhagavatam are these beautiful stories, but I feel like the pressure of just like, all right, you gotta absorb what you're reading. It made me just feel like I can't do this anymore. Like I would squirm in my seat when I'm reading the Bhagavatam. So that for me personally was something that was really hard.
I felt like that with the introduction to the Gita, definitely, that it's so densely packed that you get this is important and you feel the importance for everything, but like it's so densely packed that like if you like blink for a second, you miss something, then you're lost and then you can't find anything again.
Yeah.
I recently started listening back like to the recording of it, and that seemed a lot easier. Like when Prabhupada first transcribed it, but even then it's so much.
Yeah, exactly. Like the importance of it. Like if you miss it, then you have to go back, and it becomes a lot of pressure.
Yeah, for sure.
At least for me, with the Bhagavad-Gita, I really enjoyed it because you can go anywhere inside the Bhagavad-Gita and you can find some like a gem of knowledge that you wouldn't have found if you were just reading it through like the last previous time. But I would say one that was pretty like difficult to get into reading was Srimad-Bhagavatam, at least the introduction. When we were reading it with our family, it was very dragging, I would say, at least for the first canto.
It's interesting that you're identifying, just asking you to identify what was a little tedious for you. You're also kind of remembering what was enjoyable and what was relishable for you. And so just to all of those who are watching, we're so glad that you're here with us and that you're watching. We assume that you have some youth in your home that you're trying to encourage in reading, or that you are youth yourself trying to increase your reading of Srila Prabhupada's books. So I just want to let you know a little bit about our 4 participants. They're sitting here talking about what might have been tedious for them, but actually all 4 of them are very directly and very almost constantly engaged in sharing Krishna consciousness with others. I know the three from Dallas, they do kirtan regularly. One of them is my son's, and he's like very frequently out of the house till late and going for kirtan, and I want to tie him up and keep him home, but he's always running off and saying, I'm going to go for kirtan, we're going here. And they're doing programs. They did kirtan for Bhaktivinoda Thakur's appearance day. They go to Harinam to promote the UTD student program they have, Bhakti Yoga Club at University of Texas, Dallas. And they are actively engaged, in addition to their heavy school schedules, college schedules, actively engaged in sharing Krishna consciousness. And Mayuri, as you all may know, is a very astute Kirtaniya. In addition, she's taking Bhakti-Shastrы classes, and in addition, she's reading even more of Srila Prabhupada's books, and full-time student as well, successful in her student career. So I find it interesting that even though you do show prominence in your Krishna conscious activities, naturally, there are parts of the books that you find boring or that you find are a little tedious. And so for all of the parents and educators out there, it is okay if your child says, or your teenager says, or your 20-year-old says, oh, really, do we got to do this? It doesn't make them like a complete nonsense, juvenile delinquent. Like, it's actually okay. It's natural. We all find it ourselves that, we don't have the rasa for Krishna consciousness, and that's why we're in this material world. And so moving on now, let's find out from you, what do you relish about Srila Prabhupada's books? Clearly, you know enough about him that you're able to like talk about this book and that book and this book and that book. So what has been your relationship with Srila Prabhupada's books, and what do you relish about Srila Prabhupada's books?
I feel like whenever I'm reading, I feel like whatever he says makes sense. I can never like say like, oh, this is not right. Like, no, this doesn't work. Or I always feel like what he's saying, there's a lot of logic to it. And it's not just that he's saying because it's his opinion. It seems like applicable to different aspects of life.
Nice.
Sure.
Yeah, for sure. At least for me, a lot of it is philosophy, but also, at least in the Bhagavad-Gita, it is very applicable philosophy. Like, they give direct examples of like how you can apply it in your life with the Srila Prabhupada's purports and things like that, which is really nice.
I think it's an interesting relationship, definitely, because whenever I do read, then I get the sensation that like, these things are just so relishable, and they're so like, you get the answer to the world's problems in there, and you're absorbed in something. But I guess just the nature of the material world is that despite that, then somehow you always end up playing back to the material world. You're always like, despite feeling that when you get into reading, getting into reading is always the hard part. That like I can't like set aside time daily or something. It's hard for me to set aside time daily to just get into it. Or like I'd look into something for researching where like somebody asks me about this or this question, and I'd like open up the database and try to find like a verse for something. And I'd find that, I'd be like, oh, that's actually so cool. And I'd look through that section. But otherwise, on my own accord, it's difficult to do. I think something my dad had mentioned, like when I was telling him that I was trying to get something regularly going, was to like make yourself like a commitment to read one paragraph, like just open the book and read one paragraph. It's going to be more than that, but you just need to make that commitment to just open it up. Because it is relishable. Like, it's like you get this sense of rasa, you get kind of this very relishable understanding of both the philosophy and of Krishna's Leela. But material conditioning is such that you don't like feel like getting into it originally.
Yeah, right, for sure. And Mayuri, any thoughts?
Yeah, for me personally, I think I really like just reading pastimes in general. Like, a lot what Srila Prabhupada wrote was philosophy, but also very amazing stories from the Bhagavatam in a more, I guess, condensed form. And I think I always like, even in just regular books, I always liked fantasy. I liked having a range for my imagination. And I think because of that, when I'm reading pastimes that Srila Prabhupada wrote about Lord Krishna and his devotees, I have like have space in my mind to imagine it, how Vrindavan would look or how Krishna looks in this specific pastime. So I really enjoy that about Srila Prabhupada's books.
I love that you said that. I totally relate to that. For me as a child too, reading Prabhupada's books or just reading the scriptures was all about fantasy. It was like you visualize it, you're there, especially the Krishna book. Luckily, when we were younger, and it would probably be helpful to share this link at some point with all of you who may be watching. But when we were younger, there's certain sets, I think Burijan Prabhu put together for us in Gurukul that Mother Urmila taught us or used, where it's just the pastime sets. Abhay, I think you might have done that in the school as well with a few of the students, where it's just the pastime sets of the Srimad-Bhagavatam. And so it's like selected verses from the Bhagavatam, selected verses of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and it's not the purports. But I remember with your group here in Dallas, your reading group here in Dallas, when we were a part of it that one time, and we were talking about, should we read just the verses? Let's just read the verses, because that's what we do generally, and we don't go into the purports. Keshev Bharti Maharaj actually has 1 verse a day program. I think not 1 verse a day. No, there's some Maharaj who has like 1 chapter a day program, and he's listed out like how long it will take to complete the entire Srimad-Bhagavatam. If you do that, I believe it's Keshev Bharti Maharaj. He's been a real proponent of reading Srila Prabhupada's books. But I also remember that just doing the translations kind of keeps the flow, and some can say keeps the rasa going. But you all had said, and I loved hearing this from you, like our kids who are now adults, that no, reading Srila Prabhupada's purports are really important. And so that was an interesting experience for me to have, to hear you say that. No, reading Srila Prabhupada's purports are just as important as reading the verses. And so have you ever had like a relishable experience reading Srila Prabhupada's books? I can share that anytime like life is a little complicated, a little intense, a little negative, and I open up Srila Prabhupada's books, I feel like the verse calls to me, the verse talks to me, the verse directly knows what's going on in my life, and that Srimad-Bhagavatam is conscious, fully conscious. Have any of you ever had that kind of an experience?
Definitely. I think for me, sorry. I think sometimes I would, if I was going, like I needed an answer or something, and I think, oh, the Bhagavad-Gita would have this. Sometimes, even if it didn't relate to the situation I was going through, I would just try to open up the Bhagavad-Gita and read just a verse and what the translation was. I think just putting aside the fact that I was looking for some answer, I think that's always like a really nice experience, because it's just kind of like a message from the Bhagavad-Gita for you to just think about in general in your life.
Yeah.
I think for what it's worth, we didn't all like immediately just get into this idea of like, we love the purports, because yeah, when I was a kid, we didn't have the fancy like package sets, but like I would just read the translations of Bhagavatam just for the pastimes and skip through like the pages of purports. Every time I'd see like a 5-page purport, I'd flip past it or something. But it's just, I think it's something that you need to come to the importance of it yourself without like having it forced onto you.
Mm.
For me, like in terms of finding like relishable like kind of things out of pastimes, I'm too impatient. I don't have both the steadiness and the like determination to just like go and just read Gita from anywhere and just wait for the answer to come to me, which is why I'm very much a fan of the database folios, where I would just go search for something. I'd be like, okay, what does like Srila Prabhupada say about like Nishta, about faith, or about what does he say about pramada, about inattention, or how you get this or out of that or something. But I still have had instances of those where like I've gotten through something, like something's clicked like halfway through, where I've searched for something about this verse or that verse, and then sometime later I found, wait a second, this section of like Bhagavatam, like Canto 11 or like Madhya 22 or something, has had a lot of the answers I've been looking for, relatively. And like, or I'd go into a certain section of something and I'd read something, I was like, oh, that's actually really nice. And I just start continuing to read through. It still hasn't gotten rid of my impatience. So like I'm still just scurrying through searching for something. But once I need to start reading more regularly and more systematically and more kind of thoroughly to be able to get like a pure taste for that. And when I do that, sometimes I have starting points where I'm like, okay, if I'm going to read through, then this is one section I want to check out. Like Madhya 22 has like so many different sections of devotional service when I was looking for something for like a little class or something.
Yeah.
Some of my most relishful experiences with, especially with reading Shastra, were when like you mentioned, we have our reading groups on Saturdays generally, and we all come together. And my favorite experiences are when we read a passage, and everybody like says something, their perspective, what they thought first of all, and what they took from it, and how they felt like in their life they can apply this. And it's really amazing to see how everyone, what they were thinking when they read it, and what were their first thoughts, and how they feel like they can improve themselves. And so, not as just a group to make us better, improve as a group, but it also made us feel more connected and deepen the relationships.
Wow, that's so powerful. Both of the things you're saying, what Keshev said, what Abhay said, so powerful. Any thoughts, Nitai?
I think everybody covered like the relishableness of reading the scriptures. And I just wanted to add that, like I said earlier, if you are looking for the gems in these scriptures, you will find them. So if you just keep reading, keep persisting, you'll come upon something that you think is extraordinary. And I think that's what the best thing that the scriptures can do for you is just give you more and more knowledge.
I
Okay,
have to
so
persist more on that, Nitai. I think one of the things that I liked what I said, like I said, yeah, as we had mentioned before, a lot of the Dallas guys, we kind of have a little get together where we read Nectar of Instruction together. And I feel like that's one of those books that has that like kind of transformative power where you go through and it's you're disclosing your mind in confidence. And you're just kind of getting a real feel of like, Rupa Goswami just talks about stuff that's really relevant to your life. And all of us just start like, there's some passage somewhere. And we all are like, whoa, what does it mean to like have that lolium, that like greed that's preventing us from advancing in Krishna consciousness or this or that? I feel like that's one of those books where that I really like because you don't have to search for a gem. At every sentence, it just hits you, just like complete gems like that.
this is Nectar of Instruction, you're saying?
Yes, yeah.
It's so interesting. Just I'm learning so much. Like right now, I'm realizing that from my Bhakti-Shastrы courses that I give to teenagers, that I'm gonna add in some of what you're saying, Abhay. Just like a free space for the youth to read it and come up with their perspective on it and share their different thoughts and their different takes on it on their own, because you shared that in that group environment. It's so true. It feels like it's being churned. What do they say? The nectar is just being churned and the essence is coming like a burfi, deeper and deeper and deeper. Every single voice, every single Vaishnava, every single youth that adds to, oh, I thought that it like sounds like this, and I thought that it makes sense to me this way. And there may even be opposing views on it, but someone else's perspective on Krishna consciousness, when I hear it, I become more informed and have deeper realizations. And so I loved that. That was so beautiful that you shared. And so gems, if you think about your favorite book or your favorite encounter with a book, something that you can remember, and I'm totally putting you guys on the spot here, that like really stuck with you, that really helped you during a period of crisis, or is there a time like a gem that you found? Nitai spoke of gems, so I'm also going to think about this for me. What was a gem for me? Any thoughts?
I've definitely stumbled upon quite a few, but I just can't necessarily remember exactly what they were, but they did leave a pretty big impact, at least when I was reading them. So, but I can't point out exactly what it was.
Maybe during our conversation we'll think of more. It'll come to us. Let's see. Anyone else, or we can continue. Maybe it'll come to us by the end of this call. Maybe we'll remember by the end of this call. I know we're recording right now, and so naturally we're all nervous.
One of the things that I felt was really like really cool and really amazing were when we were going over the levels, the stages of bhakti, where it starts off. I don't even remember. I'm going to be honest. I don't remember every single word, but
Shraddha.
The
yeah,
nine ones?
Shraddha,
Shraddha,
yeah, the nine stages of bhakti, ruchi, and eventually, and I realized that it helped me realize that it's okay if you don't like it yet, because getting taste for it is a high level in itself. So if you don't enjoy doing it yet, you're still on course for becoming a pure bhakta. So that was one thing that really I thought was amazing.
Wow. Oh my goodness. Such a powerful one. I'm just getting goosebumps. But yeah, like you are scripturally saying why it's okay that it's going to take us some time and that's part of the course. Nice. Thank you, Abai.
That actually kind of relates to what I was thinking too, because I've never had that whole like I'm struggling. I'm like the come to Krishna moment where I just like read the Gita or Bhagavatam or something and it just hits me. Like,
Come to Krishna moment.
I've never had that. Like I feel like as second generation, like that's one of the things that I'm really like not quite jealous of, but I really admire about people who like join the movement themselves, because they have that moment where they're like experiencing life without Krishna and they just feel it and they just decide to like give their full life. But I feel like I've never had that moment of being like completely suffering and like coming through everything. But the closest thing I could think of say is just like kind of just the general series of just like struggling with steadiness, which is like I feel like such a hypocrite even being on the call, because like I'm not steady at all with any of my sadhana, whether it's reading or whether it's chanting. But nectar of instruction, it always comes back to nectar of instruction. Each verse like in there is so cool. And I was discussing with somebody one time, and like, what's verse 7? Jat Krishna Namatray Tadi Bhakti-Vidya Chapter Rasanasya Nirojikana. There's that one where that analogy is given that
The jaundice.
that's the one, yeah. Where Krishna's name is sweet. But because we're diseased, we can't taste it. And that's the first time I've heard in Shastra this acknowledgement. We always hear Krishna's name is sweet, that it's perfect, it's beautiful. But this is the first time I've heard Rupa Goswami like kind of acknowledging, yeah, you know, you might not be tasting it. And that's okay. Why? Because that when you're like, how do you get over that? When you're carefully chanting Anujinam every day, or very carefully, then that's kind of the cure to it. So like I'm feeling just so much more like relieved that like, okay, I might not have a taste right now, but like there's hope for me. It's not like it's normal in this diseased state of mind. But it's also just that like, okay, but then I'm not being steady, so how am I ever going to get that taste? It's a bit of a catch-22. It's hard. It's not quite an epiphany, but it's like an understanding that why I need to get more serious.
Yeah, I wanted to actually add a point to what Keshev was saying. I think he mentioned like how people that weren't born into it, that came of their own accordance. I think there's another reason why a lot of youth, you could say, don't read, is because they were never tested. They were never like, it was not a problem where like they came of their own accord.
That's so true.
Like, it's not that I was having such issues, and out of all the things I found, I really found that the Bhagavad-Gita or some like a devotee really helped me, and then I came to this realization that this is what I want to do for my rest of life. Like somebody who grew up into the movement, it's harder for you to like be philosophically involved, is because when you were younger, you were just kind of not forced into it, but you grew up into it, and you were just, it became habit, not so much you're mentally like, oh, this is why I want to do this.
It was
It's
the
more because your
expectation.
parents were,
It was
the
a default.
expectation. Yeah. And there's obviously nothing wrong with that, because as devotee parents, that's your job. That is to make your child a devotee. So, but that's just another reason why I think a lot of youth find it hard to read.
But I think despite that, that's what also brings the importance of reading, because devotee parents do their very best to kind of bring you up in terms of having that as a default, having that as like something to do. And we feel that joy and everything in kirtan and stuff, but I feel like we have to make that choice to choose to be a devotee. like chanting and kirtan, chanting and stuff, like going to temple and chanting and kirtan is all well and great. But at some point, the philosophy in the books are the point where you need to kind of choose to be a devotee. You need to choose that there's something that I consider important in my life, enough to like reach the level of committing to it.
So I have so
Whether
many
that's
thoughts here.
initiation.
My God, I have so many thoughts. You guys are, and go ahead, Mayuri, and then I'll share. Go ahead.
Yeah. I just want to say that the points that were just made are some of my favorite in this whole talk, because it kind of comes to the point where there's struggle. A lot of people go through struggle, and the struggle is okay. And like they were saying, that it doesn't come up almost very often in like the Shastras, that it is hard for you to sometimes develop a taste. Like I know personally, when I'm chanting, sometimes I feel like, man, why don't I like this? I mean, other people are over there in ecstasy, but I'm just like, when is this over? But I think that's one reason I really like the Bhagavad-Gita, is because one of the simplest things about it is that Arjuna is going through a struggle. Like I never like really thought about it before, but when I did, it was like, wow, he's in such a difficult time of his life, and Krishna is giving advice to him. And it's not like it's covered. Like in the Bhagavad-Gita, it's open that Arjuna has all these questions and all this like guilt almost, that, I mean, I'm not understanding this. Can you go over this again? And I think because of that, it makes the feeling like they said, the feeling that if you're struggling, it's okay, it'll come with time. And because of that, it kind of ties together the fact that the gems are everywhere, but they're also in the simplest things.
Nice. Yeah. It's interesting. So I'm just hearing that come to Krishna moment, that you said, Keshev. You're such a sweet devotee, and you wear Krishna consciousness very proudly on your sleeve. Like you're not shy about commenting on Facebook, this whole paragraph of, oh, Krishna says in the Bhagavad-Gita, da, 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 da. Whereas a lot of kids may feel it, may think it, but you just very prominently proclaim that I'm a Krishna conscious nerd. I study Srila Prabhupada's books, and I'm going to let you know. And so I'm just hoping, and I know that you will. And Abhay, you also mentioned that because we were born into it, we were born into Krishna consciousness, perhaps we didn't make that choice. There's the 4 Artho Jigyasa or Tarti types of people who go to Krishna, the distressed. And, people had that experience to change their whole life and feel the bliss of Krishna consciousness, whereas we didn't have. None of us had that experience. But I have had so many come to Krishna moments in my life. And I'm just really, I hope, and I'm going to pray that you also have some really strong come to Krishna moments, Keshev. I'm sure you have, and you're just humbly saying that you haven't, but I want you to have that epiphany. I had epiphanies when I was 14, when I was in public school, when I was 16, when I started going to Mangalarti and Gurukul, like major moments of like, wow, this is it. I never want to leave Krishna. I never want to leave Krishna consciousness, never want to put the books away. And I hope that you also, I know you will, and we will work towards that. Even if it just means me asking the Lord through the holy name, that you also have that feeling, because all of you are such powerful young men and women. And so I just can't wait to be a part of that journey of you discovering that and experiencing that. Clearly you take, there you are, like rattling off that verse, the Sanskrit of it, and the Anudinam daily, like you clearly know the scriptures very well. And Abhay, for all of you who are watching, Abhay used to give Bhagavatam class at the Gurukul, not Bhagavatam class, but like a class for Spiritual Friday. He was 8, maybe 9, and his classes were so serious and so well spoken. And one day all of you will be doing that. I can't wait. I think I might have a recording of it, Abhay. I'll have to send it to you one day. Okay, so moving from here, you came up with quite a few, reasons why we relish Krishna consciousness. I mean, reading Srila Prabhupada's books, and why not? Let's talk about the juxtaposition between kirtan and reading. What is the relationship with you and both of them, and how do you view that, kirtan versus reading? How can we create an environment? Here I am throwing another question, but just to turn this a bit, how can we create an environment in our own hearts and, just in the society in general, that, because there's such a kirtan environment, kirtan stars, celebrities, big festivals, programs, hundreds of thousands of dollars being put to kirtan festivals. And how is it possible to create an environment that is there for reading for youth? What would you, go for it. What are your thoughts?
I think with kirtan, it's the fact that there's a lot of externals. There's a lot of, there's instruments, there's melodies, there's a lot of things to like ornament, like the holy name. So it's like in chanting, you're just saying the words over and over again. There's no extra things going on. With kirtan, there's a lot of things that can distract you, especially when you don't have taste for it yet. And I'm in the same boat. I don't have taste for it yet. You can find yourself attached to a lot of other things like mridanga playing, like harmonium, like kartals, like flute, violin, whatever, the different instruments, the different melodies. You can find ways to attach yourself to it by becoming adept yourself. And so I generally, whenever people ask me like, oh, how do you make your kid devotee or whatever, they always ask, my thing is like, as a child, you're never going to be attached to philosophy. That's not, I mean, there are some wonderful souls that may do that, but that's not the majority. Like most people they'll be into music because music sounds cool. It's not because, oh, this is the holy name and this is purifying my heart. It's not, that's not their intention, because music sounds cool. So your job as a parent should be to attach your child to the movement, right? And so in one way, being involved in kirtan is one wonderful aspect of becoming attached to the holy name. Because I think a lot of us in Dallas, the reason we've stuck together is because we all did kirtan together growing up. And because we did kirtan growing together, we developed our connections. We had that association that we're all doing something wonderful. It's not that we're out doing other things. And so that was one thing. And then eventually when you get older, I think like Keshev mentioned, you'll have this moment where it's a conscious choice where now I want to be philosophically attached to the movement. Now I actually want to understand what Prabhupada is trying to say. How can I help on a deeper level to make somebody a devotee? So I think that's the difference between kirtan and reading when people make that choice.
I really agree with what Abhay said. It's kind of the gist of what I was thinking about too, is that things like music, for me personally, I love music and I love kirtan. I think the first thing that attracted me was the instruments, just the overall like sound, not the fact that, oh, this is the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra and this will bring you closer to God, but more the fact that it's just something cool. It's something nice. It's something fun to do with other people. And I think that applies to so many different services. Some people may like cooking and they cook for Krishna, but maybe sometimes in their mind, they might not have the like, oh, I'm cooking just for Krishna and nothing else, but also the fact that I'm just cooking and I enjoy cooking. And I think those things can bring you very much closer to Krishna, because through those ways you are offering devotion to Krishna. And over time, like Abhay said, it becomes that, it becomes the choice of, do you want it to become more of a philosophical service towards Krishna, or a very like hardcore, I'm doing this just for Krishna, like full surrenderance, which comes very hard, especially for me. And I know a lot of people too. So I think because of that, reading is a little harder and it's a little different, because with reading, like I said before, you have to understand what you're reading. And it can't be like, I'm reading this because I enjoy reading, but it's also that I have to understand what I'm reading. And if you don't enjoy what you're reading, then it becomes a little like, I don't know if I want to continue doing this.
I think there's something to be said about kind of externals versus internals when you're first looking about this, because the kirtan is one of the most like attractive ways to get somebody interested in Krishna consciousness. I agree with Abhay that that's how I got to know everybody from Dallas. Like, and I've been interested in music for such a long time, like studying classically, everything else, and it takes some effort to become comfortable with kind of being externally facing with kirtan. Like what you mentioned earlier about me being comfortable with being publicly facing as a devotee. I guess that's kind of come with some encouragement from people around kirtan and stuff, whether it's doing kirtan publicly, or even just displaying the symptoms of a Vaishnava publicly, like through encouragement from a lot of the Dallas guys like Akai, Nitai, Yuri. I started keeping shika a couple of years ago, or started like wearing tilak during like COVID or something. But the external appearance of like chanting and doing and just like being okay with being a devotee is one thing, but it really does need the internals as well. Because like yesterday was like Bhakti-Vedanta Thakur's appearance day. And what does he say? He says that simply vibrating syllables of the holy name is not equivalent to chanting the name.
Wow.
And especially like now that I'm trying to become more comfortable with wanting to be a devotee, having that aspiration that, okay, I want to be a serious devotee, whether it's like trying to put on tilak every morning, like being unafraid of like kind of answering questions about that, then I also have to kind of be careful that, you know, he also says, Eo Toika Kali Chela. There's that song, I think, from Bhagavad Gita or something, where he says, oh, here's another disciple of Kali Yuga. He's wearing tilak, he has kanti and stuff, but he doesn't like have the internal mood. And so I think, yeah, like it's important for you to be involved in kirtan, but I think it's even like because of that, it's way more essential for us to at least strive, have that understanding, even if you're not at that level, that the interior should match. That we should be working equally as much, if not more, on making sure that our interior mood is more there, which is, yeah, something that I've found that I struggle with a lot.
I completely agree. I just think that was a really, really nice point. That internals is sometimes even more important than externals of whatever service you're doing to Krishna. And I think the reason I was saying that the externals kind of attract more people is because when you're not a member of like a society, or said like the Hare Krishna society, right? The first thing you see are the externals. Like these people wear these funky orange clothes and they hold little bags and they dance around with symbols. And that's the first thing they see. They see the externals. But I think the beauty of it is when you go into it and see that this all has a meaning. And that always makes things even more relishable, is that this has a connection to God. And because I enjoy doing it, it is something that I can always do.
And I think like people don't notice the internals behind there too, because among youth and stuff, and there's so much of like a idolization of like kirtan personalities and everything.
Kirtan celebrities.
Yeah. Like everybody says, oh, Andrew was so great at kirtan, but nobody, like people don't realize the amount. It's kind of like an iceberg scenario where you see the tip, but you don't see just the mass of like just accumulated sadhana of just like really deep internal conviction from Srila Prabhupada, from Ayendra Prabhu, from Athiya Prabhu, from the people that we just see them like sing kirtan, they're amazing. And all of us are like, oh, we want to learn the tunes and stuff to sing like them. But that's not what attracts people. But that's not what attracted people in terms of preaching, in terms of kirtan, just having just the right thing to say, or the right note to hit, or the right mridanga beat. What attracts is the purity, and that comes from study, from like personal endeavor.
Oh wow, such important points you're making. Yeah, that actually all of that, the ability to attract someone by the holy name, comes from the conviction inside one's heart, the Krishna Bhakti Kaile Sarva Karma Krita Hoy, and that conviction comes through deep study and through attraction to the holy name. So I'm going to throw out a, what we do in the classroom is this 4 corners activity, where we say a sentence and you have to identify if you're agreeing, disagreeing, strongly agreeing, or strongly disagreeing with the statement, okay? And there is no right or wrong answer in this, because each of us has a specific relationship with either kirtanam or shravanam or padasevanam, and that's okay for you to prefer kirtan over reading, or for you to prefer reading over kirtan. That's quite okay. And so we're going to do this. I'm going to say a sentence, and you're going to decide, do you strongly agree, disagree, or strongly disagree with it, and share why, share your reasonings why. So the statement is that reading Srila Prabhupada's books is way more important than engaging in kirtan. Reading Srila Prabhupada's books is way more important than engaging in kirtan. Let's go, Nitai. What are your thoughts?
Feel like this is a loaded question.
This is why I'm glad I let Nitai go first.
It depends on what you define as more important. Like for your personal like conviction, I would say that reading is probably more important just to like for you to understand the philosophy. But if you want to like preach or like just like show what Krishna consciousness means, like try to attract people with kirtan, maybe that's more applicable in your life. But
Okay, so do you?
I guess it depends on what you're trying to do.
So I liked
need
that
to
you
answer,
broke
Nitai.
that. Yeah. Okay. So I like that you broke that down, like as to what the purpose of it is. But if you just kept it super simple and thought agree, disagree, strongly agree, or strongly disagree, which would it be?
Neutral.
Nitai, you fence sitter.
Anyone else?
Could you
Is
repeat
this-
the question?
Yes. Reading Srila Prabhupada's books is way more important than kirtan.
I would disagree just because it's not way more important. It's not that, because like Nitai said, kind of like the holy name does have its own power. Just because I'm not pure doesn't mean that the holy name doesn't have its power. So I can still go on Harinam as an individual and attract devotees and make devotees, even though I'm not pure myself. And I'm not saying that you don't need purity. That's definitely aspect, but because we're comparing, saying one is way more important than the other, I wouldn't say it's more important.
Okay. Anyone else?
I think I agree with what Nitai was saying. It is kind of depending on what you're trying to do with your service to Krishna, but I also think they can go side by side. Like if you're a really like a really nice kirtaniya, right? Well, of course, like the music and everything, but like you like personally go in deeper into the philosophy so you can meditate on it, possibly. I think reading Srila Prabhupada's books is something that would like totally help you in that process. So depending on what you're trying to achieve, I think either or would work, because like Abhay said, it's very much I'm not getting how to say it. It's very much depends.
Yeah. Okay. So you're neutral like Nitai?
Yes.
That's two neutral and one disagree. Keshev, what's your thoughts?
I feel like I might buck the trend here, and I might say agree. But let me clarify, because if I were to say something, I'd probably be closer to Nitai, Mayuri, because I think they're parallel tracks. I think that you need to be able to chant in, like, to be able to advance in spiritual life, and you need to be able to have a taste for Krishna's name. But here's why I say I agree that reading Srila Prabhupada's books and like studying and listening, listening to him is more important. How do you get to chant the name? How do you get to chant like the actual name and get to have some understanding of like the purity and things? Because I can see how you say, yeah, that you can preach and stuff without needing that, but I've attempted and it does not work. And you like, you can, I feel like you might be able to have a taste or relationship with Krishna without ever knowing how to pick up an instrument and play or anything. But if you're doing kirtan, you're playing your instruments and there's no substance behind it, then like there's that time when Srila Prabhupada was hearing this like festival of like chanting in Mayapur, I think, when he heard like some devotees just chanting very excitedly and from I think Bengal, and then he said, I'm not hearing Krishna, 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 I'm hearing money, money, money.
Oh, wow.
And
That's pretty drastic.
yeah. And so I'm going to say agree, because I think that I wouldn't say strongly important, but I'd say if you had to pick one to be a good devotee, I'd say definitely Shravanam, because
Interesting.
then Shravanam automatically means that, like, if you're hearing more, then you're going to be chanting more. That you're going to be wanting to do more. You're going to want to, like, bring more stuff out of it.
So sorry, Keshev. So what's so beautiful is that about Krishna consciousness is that the application of Krishna consciousness can be to vast extremes, achintya bheda bheda tattva. And you see so many contradictions, even in the gopis and the way they relate with the Lord, the devotees of the Lord. So many different instructions that Srila Prabhupada gives that are contradictions even with themselves, because some instructions he's giving to George Harrison, some instructions he's giving to his like personal servant. And so of course, Krishna consciousness is an absolute truth, but in the application of Krishna consciousness, according to your particular bhava, your mood, you will feel something more important or less important. That having been said, I strongly agree, just because my personality has always been to be more attached to reading Srila Prabhupada's books than the Kirtan. But my sister, I would like to say, Gauramani Mataji, she probably would perhaps disagree, because her primary connection with the Lord is through Kirtan. But yeah, so it's interesting to hear, the differences in you. We're coming up a little on time, so I'm thinking like let's end now with one last topic, and really the purpose of this week, this Shravanam week, or books are the basis week. I'm very first wanted to shout out to and offer my respects to His Grace Tapan Mishra Prabhu, who is the Minister of Education right now, serving as the main representative internationally from Mayapur Dham, and who works tirelessly to get this message out, to just encourage all devotees to please read Srila Prabhupada's books. And he's joining, quite a slew of Maharajas who have taken this as their personal mission to try and get all of us to reinstigate our attachment to reading Srila Prabhupada's books. And so what would you, as youth who are in that journey, developing that relationship with yourself of consistency, and, how would you encourage someone else to read Srila Prabhupada's books, knowing where you're at, that you're not like, a sannyasi, pure devotee who's reading every single day for like 3 hours a day or whatever? How would you encourage others to reach? How would you encourage communities to develop this, or friends of yours, or youth groups, or, a little brother, a little sister to reach the Prabhupada's books? What would you say?
I think association is probably one of the most important factors when you're trying to become a devotee. And we have a lot of Kirtan festivals. We always have a lot of japa retreats. We have a lot of different retreats. And generally to the japa retreat, you'll see elder devotees go, or senior devotees go. And so I think for the youth, we need to have probably more reading-based groups, reading festivals, or retreats where everyone just gets together. Because when you see people all over the world trying to, become a better devotee, because I think we're all, not all of us, but most people at their early 20s or later teens are starting to realize that, it's not just kirtan. It's about actually understanding the philosophy. And so at this point, when everyone sees like a collective effort to become a better devotee, and the method is to read, because that is Prabhupada's direct instruction. And so I think having more retreats of that kind would be a boost.
Okay, so reading retreats. That's what I'm hearing from you. Okay. Anyone else?
I would say, like, as just an individual level, if you're on the edge of starting to read, I would say I would just say try it, and there's nothing wrong that can come out of it. So these books are priceless, and whenever you read them, you're adding on to knowledge that you already have. So you're not losing anything, you're gaining knowledge, and there's really nothing that can go wrong. And
nice.
Yeah.
I love your conviction, Nitai. It's such a privilege to hear your conviction. Thank you.
Right. Like, and also I was thinking that, like you said, that we're not really, I'm personally no way qualified to like preach to someone and say, oh, I know this about this Srila Prabhupada book, and I think you should try to read it, because that you'll have this door opened up into your life. But I think that's kind of what Srila Prabhupada's books are for. like Srila Prabhupada, I know he always said that I'll live on through my books. And Srila Prabhupada is the one who created this beautiful society. And through his books, he inspired people to come to Krishna consciousness and go deeper into their relationship with God. And I think if you inspire someone in somehow, some way, to have maybe association with devotees or just come to a temple, or even how Srila Prabhupada did it with food and music, I think when they read the book, Srila Prabhupada will carry it on for himself, because those are such priceless pieces of advice and lessons that we can all apply in our life.
Nice.
To kind of tie together what everybody else has said, I think it's something that needs to be taken care of at a grassroots level, where we need to kind of understand the importance of it and encourage each other to go deeper into something. And it's something that's done like very intimately in small in groups with your friends, with your well-wishers, as Guya Makyati Brishti, revealing your mind in confidence, as Rupa Goswami recommends, as like a couple of us started doing in Dallas and stuff. And that's, I think, really, we need to start getting that mentality of devotees of checking in on each other in terms of our personal sadhana, our personal reading and stuff. I believe it was Jagannath Das Babaji when he met Gorkishore Das Babaji for the first time. His introduction was like, "How is your bhajan doing?" And they started crying that they haven't like attained like love of God yet. And like we're definitely not at that level, but I feel like Mayuri said, like I'm personally struggling. Like I can't be on a soapbox and say, oh, you should read because they have all the answers of the world in here, which they do. But how can I say that if I haven't opened them up and like found and searched for them? I think the approach to take is kind of just like acknowledging that we're all struggling with something or the other in terms of it, and that we should check in on each other and be like, hi, how's your reading been, or what did you read nicely from last time, or like I didn't read anything much, did you? Should we read something together? Or like getting together in a couple of groups and getting some like realizations, or like checking in with each other, like I read this and I had this thought about it, what do you think?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. So what I'm hearing from you all, starting with Nitai, he was just like, basically just do it. Just open the book up and read it and you'll get those gems. And Mayuri was like, Srila Prabhupada will do it. I love it. I will live forever through your books. Like, you hear about book distributors and how they've given a book to some random gentleman and that person had that book on their shelf, and like 5 years later, some catastrophe hit them. And then it was like they went and opened the book and they became a devotee, but that book was on their shelf. Like the books themselves are conscious. One word, one line, it's like fully conscious. And then Abba is like association. Like association is key. Reading retreats and group reading activities. And then Keshev, you're taking it even further. That not only just that we hang out with each other and read together, but that you check in on each other. How is your book reading going? And so let's end with a visualization of what, here I'm adding, anyways, just we're visualizing it right now. You guys do reading groups right now. And you had talked a little bit like about ornamenting kirtan, Abhay, where you have the mridanga and the flute and this and that. How do you ornament your reading group? What does that look like for you all? What do you add to the pot to make the reading like more interesting?
I think people like things more when they can relate to it and when it feels more like they can apply things in life. So a lot of times when you read something, whether it's a pastime, it seems very theoretical. It seems like something like above us that it has nothing to do with this is Krishna's pastime. But when I think if you start saying like this is happening in my life and how can I relate to this, and with a group of friends, when they also relate to it, because everyone is struggling in their own way. So when you apply practical, your experiences and someone else's experience, it becomes more not so much as like we're reading a book. It's more like we're having fun. We're talking about what's going on in our life.
And so what I'm looking for is you have your reading group here in Dallas, which, people want to attend, they want to go to. But what else are you doing other than reading? It's not like you're just reading.
So initially, we used to do like one person gives a class in the sense that, all right, I'm gonna like the 9 stages of Bhakti I talked about. One of our friends, Shakshi, he's like, okay, my topic is gonna be the 9 stages of Bhakti, and I will go over this. And then it's basically a class of sort, but it's not so formal because it's with your friends, right? So it's more like a discussion and not so much a class. And so they're in one sense learning it, and because they take responsibility of teaching it to the next time. So they're learning, and then we're also learning, and the teacher learns the best, right? The teacher is the best student. So I think responsibility and just being accountable, because you're giving class, so that is basically you obligated yourself to do it. So it is something that will happen. So I thought that was responsibility was a major key.
Nice. Okay.
I think a couple of the peripherals that we also added to our group that like kind of make it more like relaxed in order to come together. We have like we sometimes do like a potluck where like we each kind of try to bring something a little bit. So at the very least,
you have a potluck, cooking, and you're hanging out. Isn't there sports involved in this?
There is some sports sometimes afterwards, depending.
And so all the kids get together and play ball.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like a retreat, right? A retreat means you're not just doing the reading, you're doing other things as well. You're eating, you're playing games. Don't you guys play games as well?
Sometimes it'll generally be like reading prasadam, and you'll talk, and then on chosen days sometimes we'll have games or something.
Yeah, the sports aren't like a regular thing, but we're doing more like just kind of reading prasadam, a little bit of kirtan.
Nice. Nice. So it's like the full package, and it's changing it up. What I experienced with reading with my family, I was, for me, reading Srila Prabhupada's books is like such a very, very deep part of my identity. I always have, since I was very young, loved reading Srila Prabhupada's books, more than kirtan, as I said earlier. So when we started reading with our boys, my husband, he had another experience growing up. His mother would just, at the end of the day, everyone would pile in the bed, even when he was like 6 and 7, and read Krishna book as a very light, relaxing leisure activity. And my understanding of reading was like a very formal, it's a class type of activity. And so it took us some time to figure out like kind of a middle ground. And so when my husband reads with us as a family, he like says the Sanskrit words in a funny way. Sometimes we'll make voices for the purport. And the whole thing for our family became more of a peaceful, relaxed way instead of like a super strict, heavy, hardcore way. And through that, the kids developed like this ability to relate to each other, discuss, like you're saying, like a confidence, a space where they were accepted, where they weren't going to be judged, where they weren't going to be, they weren't going to be attacked for differing opinions. And so, yeah, it sounds like something that you all have also done is figure out how to make it relishable. And so I'm just saying that to our audience here. Like, if you want to create a reading environment, figure out how to make it fun. Everything in Krishna consciousness is so relishable, but we tend to, as adults and as sadhaka bhaktas, take out the joy. Like, we're so expert at taking the joy out of something that if you're having fun, you must not be actually taking it seriously. Like, don't have fun studying for your test, right? If you're studying for a test and you're having a good time, it means you're not studying properly. So what Richard Martin says, the fun police.
Always studying for a test was fun in any episode, but
studying for a test can be so fun. The way my husband does it is so fun, like the way he studies for tests. All right. So are there any last thoughts, any last words of wisdom any of you'd like to share? We'll start with Nitai and just go around in a circle as we end this broadcast.
I would just say that reading Srila Prabhupada's books are very important, and that if you can, you should probably start a reading group with your friends and just go from there.
All right. Thank you. Mayuri, any thoughts? Last words?
Yeah, I'm just very grateful for Srila Prabhupada's books. I think they are was an opportunity not only to understand more because our culture is very much derived from the books. Books are the basis, is because all of our principles and practices are from the books. But also, I think reading them tells you a lot about Srila Prabhupada, what a wonderful man he was, and how he did so much to bring these scriptures to America. And yeah, I'm very grateful for having Srila Prabhupada's books.
All right. Abhay?
Yeah, I think just to maybe parents who are watching, with reading, your goal is to make your child a devotee in the long term, not in like a short term, like, oh, do it right now, do it right now, do it right now. But like you want them to become attached, and you want them to actually want to serve Krishna and Prabhupada on their own accord. So you don't want to force a pill down somebody's throat, because once you're gone, they're not going to do it. So, and you could have the worst effect where you oppose, it makes them feel opposed. So you don't want to pressure anybody into becoming Krishna conscious, because it's, in the end, everything's internal. It's on your own accord, how much you want to become a devotee, because your endeavor will result in how much you end up becoming pure.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Wonderful.
I think, as always, everything in Mahaprabhu's movement of bhakti comes from relationship and taste.
Mm.
And so, in terms of reading Srila Prabhupada's books, for all of us, we're all struggling with something. So, like, start with something. Like, open the book, read a paragraph, whenever you can. Make like some sort of commitment for something, and eventually, yeah. In Bhadaraj energy that like through daily practice, something comes. And relationship wise, meaning that like, yeah, I don't think any of us are gonna like say that we're not struggling. Like we've all got some issue with our reading, with our sadhana, with our japa, with anything that we're not to the level we want to be at. So like it helps so much to be able to check in with people, you know, to pray for each other, to like check and see how you're doing with your japa and stuff. So like among the people you know, like see how they're doing with the reading, try to compare realizations, see what like if neither of you guys have had realizations, and start getting together, start reading something, try to get something out of it. And even among like my friends, I'm always the first one to say like I'm not at the level I want to be. I'm very much struggling. So if something that you read resonates with me, or something that I read resonates with you, then pray for me, you know, that I can get like a better taste for it.
So beautiful. Taste, relationship, no force, a relationship with Srila Prabhupada. And just summing it up, yeah, I'm so grateful to have this conversation with you. I feel like the points you're making are so valuable. The most important point that was just made right now is this, just because it needs to be reminded so much, don't force, don't force, don't force, don't force. We're trying to nourish Bhakti Creeper very gradually, very naturally. And clearly your parents have all done that very wonderfully. And let's end with a visual that I hope we can all get to, where there was this devotee Brahmana who was reading the books. He had the Bhagavad-Gita and it was upside down. And he was reading the Bhagavad-Gita upside down. Do you all know this story? And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, people were making fun of him. The brahmanas around him and the devotees were just making fun of him. He's an illiterate. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's reading the book, but it's upside down. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, no, he is reading the book and he's seeing it in his heart. He's visualizing it, because he would be reading the book upside down and tears would be flowing from his eyes. And so he understood the meaning of the book, of the Bhagavad-Gita so intensely and so strongly, that he was experiencing already at the stage of bhava from those 9 stages you were talking about in his reading of Srila Prabhupada's book. And lastly, one of the verses, 2 verses I'm going to share with all of you who are watching and with all of you 4. There is this verse that I learned. I don't know where it's from, but I learned it when I had just moved to Laguna Beach when I was 19 years old. And there was this little brahmacharini. She was an American devotee, and she was always in bliss, and she was like brand new to Krishna consciousness, and she'd be like skipping places and dancing places, and she loved this verse. And this was Api Shvara Modhe Pratipada Siddha Koti Madhure Purana Gramantar Vahati Tava Leela Rasajare Mano Vatsak Patum Vishaya Vishakarte Vishatime Kripayasya Damana Damanam Tarnika Pate. Something like that. I might have missed a few words there. But inside every single word of the Puranas, of the Shastra, of the scriptures, there's like a full reservoir of Amrita nectar that's resided in there. And by taking it, by reading it, you can relish so much pure transcendental ecstasy that it's unfathomable. Api Swara Modhe Koti Madhure Purana Gramantar Vahati Tava Leela. Your pastimes, the Lord's pastimes, are literally in every single one of the words. Even the tedious, boring words with a specific lens, if you look at it, and I'm learning how to do this, you can see Krishna's pastimes. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur does this so amazingly in his commentary on the Bhagavad-Gita, where it's like Krishna's pastimes through it. Oh, wow. Keshev found that out. Ashtadasa Chanda Stava of Rupa Goswami's. Wow, Keshev, I have been wondering where that verse was from a really long time. Thank you for Googling that. But the problem is that our mind, like you're all saying, is attached to the thorns on the side of the path, the bhakti path. And so we're asking the Lord through this prayer to please, with your stick that curbs the cows, please curb my mind of a cow to come to the path of reading Srila Prabhupada's books. Oh my gosh, it's the whole verse. How did you find that? Although the very sweet nectar stream of your transcendental pastime swiftly flows through the Puranas, the calf of my mind has now entered a ditch to drink the poison of material sense happiness. O Lord of the calves, please quickly curb him with your stick of mercy. You've got to email that to me, okay, Arjun? The second verse that I'm going to end with is the gopis. They sing in the middle of their Gita, Tavakatamritam tapta jivanam, that actually the nectar of your words and the descriptions of your activities, they're like, for those of us that are in the blazing fire of material existence, they're the potion. They're something that we hang on to, we hold on to. And you're all really young, but wait till you hit your 20s and your 30s, you're going to start feeling this fire of material existence when relationship issues come up and illnesses and all this crap, am I allowed to say that, comes up in your life. You're going to start feeling like this, like, Krishna, where are you? So you'll start really being able to relish Srila Prabhupada's books at that time in your life when you're like really needing Krishna. And that's what the gopis say, Tavakatamritam tapta jivanam. And so we'll end there. Again, thank you guys so much of your valuable time in this. And whoever is watching, if it's on social media, just do me a favor right now and hit that share button and let this go far and wide, and have a blast reading, and comment if you are reading, and if you're reading Srila Prabhupada's books, which books do you like, which books are a little tedious, and tell us if any of you are ever planning a reading retreat as these boys in Dallas already do. Alrighty, thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.